Today we stand once more on the coastline of Ironreach, where there are some debts that cannot be measured in coin. The salt wife learned this too late. She believed the sea could be reasoned with. She was wrong.
The storm had worried the coast all night with the kind of force that Ironreach knew too well. Wave after wave striking the harbour until the ropes hissed, the masts knocked, and the air tasted of salt and furnace smoke. When morning came, the sky itself was rusted, and the town rose and returned to work. On the shingle beyond the quay, I walked alone with my hood up. My oilskins were stained by years of sea spray, and my boots were patched and worn. I carried a knife at my belt, not entirely for show, and I moved along pebbles who knew my tread. I never carried a sack to begin with. Instead, I walked and watched until I was sure the tide was finished with its daily game of hide-and-seek. Ironreach folk did not use my name. They called me the Salt Wife when they wanted to sound harmless, and that Sea Witch when they wanted to be cruel and hide their unease. Men said it into tankards, pretending it was only talk, but women said it when children or coin went missing. The harbour took what it took, and the town needed someone to blame who was still alive to hear it. I did not correct them. The tide was far out, and long strips of kelp lay like torn banners across the stones. A broken oar jutted into the grey light, and a class coop glinted between the weeds. Somewhere, farther along the beach, a man in a knitted cap prized at something with a hooked bar, swearing loudly when it slipped. "Morning, Sea Witch," he called. I walked on, allowing his words as a gull screamed overhead and drifted inland. I tracked the line where the wet pebbles met the seaweed and the remnants of the tide. I stepped around a patch of shining rock, and then my body told me to stop. There was a girl there, a little nearer the water than most children were usually allowed to stand. She looked about 12 years old, and her cloak was far too big. Her boots didn't match either, and a knife hung at her hip, also appearing too large for her hand. "You'll lose your boots out there," I called to her. The girl glanced down at only snatched feet. "They were nearly lost when I got them." "Nearly lost isn't lost." The girl shrugged, impatient with the difference. "So long as I can still walk," she said. I watched her for a moment and then turned back to the shingle. I resumed my work, skimming the weed and the crevices between stones. The sea returned rope, timber and iron when it was bored of keeping them, and bodies too sometimes, if the surf had chewed them enough. It did not return everything, though. I had always known that. I saw a length of tarred rope and cut it free from a snag, then looped it over my shoulder. It was ordinary salvage, the kind of thing that made people think me useful despite their disdain. I moved again, continuing along the detritus of the sea and hoping for treasure. Then I was stopped dead by the sight before me. Laying in a shallow cradle of weed and part buried in sand, a length of carved bone. I pulled it up and knew immediately what I was looking at. One end was thickened into a shape with the rounded line of a candle's body. Around that grip a mark had been precisely curved, and it was no simple rune. It was a sigil, a twist and a loop with the appearance of a knot that might pull tighter if you stared too long. The shaft tapered away from the grip, but the taper did not look carved. It looked grown like a horn or a tooth. But this was no remnant of a beast. This was a wand. Behind me the girl called out, "You found something." But my mind was elsewhere. It travelled back to a night I had left far behind, a stormy night with rain like gravel and wind that had screamed through the streets of Ironreach until the town cowered. I remembered running, clutching a wrapped weight to my chest and reaching the shore. The black water foamed and its terrible cold rose through my boots. I remembered the words I had spoken, imploring the sea to take what I could not carry any longer. The sea had obliged, and took it, granting me the quiet I craved. That day it had sent the reminder. The girl was upon me now, and examining that carved mark. "It's so clean," she said. "Yes," I stammered in reply. "Why is it clean?" I stared at the sigil of the drowned knot carved into it and closed my eyes. Its grip was cold, but there was no response from it, and I breathed easy again. Opening my eyes, I noticed the girl again, staring at me, puzzled. I wrapped the wand and hid it inside my coat, then gathered the rope and turned back toward the quay. The girl followed, uninvited, a few steps behind me. Ironreach did not greet us. The harbour groaned and masts crowded the docks as usual. The air was that familiar blend of salt and soot. We passed a fishmonger's stall where a woman in a shawl glared at me and spat out the customary slur, "Sea witch." I did not stop or look back, but the girl remained fixed to my side, undaunted. In the lanes behind the quay, the lodging-houses huddled together, sharing their warmth, and I halted at the shabby establishment I live in and climbed the narrow stair to my room. The girl followed me up. I admired her quiet persistence. At the door I decided to test it. "You don't come in." She frowned. "Why not?" "Because this isn't your place." "That's not a reason. That's you saying no." I tried to close the door, but the girl set her boot against it. For a moment we stared at one another, testing how far our refusals could go. I admit I relented first and stepped back to grant the girl entry. My room was small and sparsely appointed, with damp in the corners, something few who lived in Ironreach could escape. I set the rope on the floor, unwound the cloth, and laid the bone wand on the bed. The girl didn't touch, she just stared at it. "It looks like a wand." "It's bone," I said. "It's still a wand." The girl looked closer, fixing on the grip. "What's that sign?" "A mark," I said. "Have you seen it before?" I sat on a stool and stared at the wound myself. It did not move, glow, or exhibit any signs of the power it may possess. It waited, and that was worse. The girl interrupted my thoughts. "Are you scared of it?" "No." I suspect she detected the lie, but chose not to expose it, as any other child might have done. She questioned it like someone stubbornly chasing the truth. "Why did you take it?" "Because leaving it doesn't make it gone," I offered. She nodded, apparently satisfied. Then an unexpected question. "What's your real name?" People in Ironreach never asked it. I had been given names that suited their mouths, Salt Wife and Sea Witch, and I left it at that. I considered lying to her. I had lied enough in my life to keep myself alive. Yet something in the girl's face reminded me of myself at that age, before storms and bargains and the sea learning my weaknesses. "Zaria," I said. I sensed she found it too grand a name for the crumpled bed, the cracked jug and the cold brazier, and the damp of my surroundings. The girl repeated it. "Zaria." "Only once here. Not out there, though." She nodded solemnly. "I won't." She looked back to the wand. "Where did it come from, then?" "From the sea." "No, before that." I could not tell the story of the night I made my bargain. I could not say what I had carried to the shore and offered to the tide, because I could no longer bear it. I could not say what I had asked for. If I spoke the truth, it might live again and never be quiet. I just stood up abruptly. "Go home," I said. The girl did not move. Why you are sending me away now? Because you don't need to learn this kind of thing. I really meant it. But the girl carried on. I already know things. You think because I'm a child I'm spared? I knew the girl was not telling lies. Ironreach did not spare children, and the sea did not spare anyone. I picked up the wand and held it close. When something returns, it means the sea is finished with it, I said. The girl was not really following me. Finished, she said. It kept it quiet, and now it's done. She stared at me. And what does it want from you? I could not answer. I opened the door and stood aside. The girl hesitated and then stepped out before descending the stairs and disappearing into the lane. I shut the door and put my forehead against it. In that room I had heard the sea inside of everything. It was steady, insistent. It intruded into my life and had done for years. I did not sleep. Before dawn I dressed without lighting the brazier, though the room was bitterly cold. I wrapped the bone wand and tucked it inside my coat. I took nothing else and entered the lane as Ironreach began to stir. I walked toward the end of the breakwater. The town was not watching me now, or if it was, it did not care enough to speak. Halfway along the breakwater I heard boots behind me, and I did not need to turn to know who it was. The girl stood 10 paces back, hands buried in her pockets, cloak flapping in the wind. "I knew you'd go," she said. I could only sigh. "Go home." The girl shook her head. "No, not yet." I looked past her to the harbour, to the smoke, the masts, and the doughty town that would keep working whether I lived or died. Indifference was a kind of mercy sometimes. It meant no one would stop me, but also that no one would pretend to mourn my death. "You don't understand," I said. I had nothing else. "I understand enough," the girl replied. "It's that bone thing. You're carrying it like it's made of iron." "Say back," I said. The girl stayed where she was. "Is it bad?" I looked out to sea. The waves rolled and spray drifted under a pall of grey sky. "It's finished with me." "What does that mean?" she asked. I pulled the wand from inside my coat and unwrapped it. The bone looked almost luminous against the dead morning. The carved mark around the grit looked much darker now. "It doesn't look like it belongs here," the girl said. "It doesn't?" "Then why did the sea bring it to you?" "Because I asked the sea to take something once, but I didn't know what I was doing. I was desperate. I wanted quiet. I wanted it gone." The girl was confused now. "Gone where?" "Where the sea keeps what it keeps." "And now it's given back?" she asked me. Yes. I think she partially realized the truth of it. "So it gets to decide?" I almost laughed at that. "It doesn't decide. It takes. We decide how close we stand." "You're not going in," she said. For a moment I saw the child for what she was. Ironreach produced people like this, and the sea noticed them early. "You asked my name, girl. Don't ask it again, and never speak it again." I moved back to the end of the breakwater, where the rocks vanished into deeper water. The wind tugged at my hood, and the spray chilled my cheeks. I held the wand out over the sea, and felt a resistance in my hand. It was not magic or power. I had held this thing now, and it had momentarily become my own. I lowered it into the water. A wave lapped against the bone, and down it went until the mark was submerged, and I released it. The sea took the wand back, drawing it down and carrying it away. I stood there with empty hands, and the relief of it was both immediate and unbearable. It made me hate myself and understand with the bleakest clarity that this was not a choice I could ever walk away from. I dropped my cloak, my dress and my underclothes, and lastly I removed my boots. I then walked forward into the water. The cold struck me like a blade, climbing my feet, my calves, and then my thighs. The tide tugged at my legs, but I kept moving, walking forward to a fate I had avoided for too long. Behind me the girl's voice broke against the wind. "Don't!" she cried. I did not turn. I had no words left that could change anything. The town behind the breakwater was smoke and iron and indifference. The sea in front of me was steady, patient, and endless. It did not rage or judge. It simply finished what was unfinished. The wave hit my chest and knocked me off balance, and my feet left the rocks. The water rolled me, and I swallowed salt. My arms flailed instinctively, but then slowed as the clothes sank into my bones and movement became a distant memory. For a moment the world was dark, green, and roaring. Then the pressure changed and the pull intensified. Panic tried to rise, but found nowhere to take hold because the sea was simply taking up the whole space. Finished, I thought, and let the sea take me, while the girl watched helplessly, trying to make sense of all she had witnessed. Ironreach roped to grey light smoke and work. Men went to the docks, apprentices fed furnaces, and the harbour shivered. No bell was rung and no door knocked for me. No prayers were said for the salt wife, no curses uttered for the sea witch. In a town filled with absences from debt and tide, one more would make no difference. When the tide went out again, the sea deposited its salty haul on the pebbles as normal, and the girl waited. She was the first to find it and stood over it for a long time. It looked the same, the grip curved carefully and the strange mark intact. The girl did not touch it, bend down, or take it. She only looked until its shape was burned into her mind. Then she turned and walked back toward the town, making her way to the stairway leading to my room at the boarding house. On the first step she placed the flower and a note with one word. Zaria. And then she disappeared into the noise of Ironreach, never to speak it again.
Debts ignored do not expire, and in the marchlands, when they are finally called in, they are collected by forces that never forgot. The moral is simple and unforgiving. You may choose when you borrow peace, but you never choose when payment comes due.